getting our recording going again. So anybody who wants to go through the replay, we're recording right now. So I want to introduce first myself. I'm Stephen Oliver, founder, director of Advisor Wealth Mastery, and I've been, deep into the woods on effective direct response marketing. Heck, goes all the way back to when I was at Georgetown University attending SBA courses and living at the Library of Congress back in 1982. And then I moved to Denver, opened a business of my own where I brought in 2,500 clients in the first 18 months with 5 and then 6 physical retail locations. And since then in that business, have brought in over 35,000 clients and have used every mechanism, everything from direct mail, infomercials, direct response TV, direct response radio, to writing the first book in that niche on internet marketing back in 1999. And Mindy, you were too young to remember this, but this was when the first search engine was Alta Vista and Google the first directory, and then GoTo had an innovation of actually letting you buy advertising and buying clicks, which is where Google got the idea. So I wrote a book on internet marketing back then and another book on direct response marketing, and have been through that business, ended up working with a smattering of financial advisors going back over 20 years, and figured out, frankly, that the level of marketing knowledge within the niche is appallingly bad. And so not to insult anybody here, but it is something that really needs to be addressed. And I'm going to promote Greg to panelist since he logged in as a participant here. But my background is many years working with businesses of all sizes and shapes on the marketing, and I'm good friends with and associates of Dan Kennedy, among others, but worked with all the different marketing gurus in and out of the industry over the years. And we're joined by Mindy Godfrey. And Mindy, I have an MBA. You have a master's degree also, and it's in the wonderfully associated field of theology, which I'm sure most of the advisors are praying for good returns for their clients or praying for more clients.
Exactly.
But in a more relevant area, you were an early staff member of Eventbrite and have been very involved with helping promote and develop live events ranging in size from 15 to what was the biggest, 42,000 or something like that?
Yeah, a little over 40,000. So
And
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
before that, you specialties promoting live events for them, as well as then promoting books, working with authors, developing books for authors that then help promote their business. So an awful lot of relative background, even though you've got a degree from Vanderbilt that's a little bit of a flyer there. And speaking of degrees that are a flyer, we have our official PhD in psychology here, which actually comes in very handy on client relations and interactions, I must say. But we've got our official rocket scientist. You were one of the few people who really were a rocket scientist, and but now have been working with me, and we've been working with doing small business consulting, financial advisor consulting, and so forth. I don't know how long it's been now, Greg. I lose track, but it's probably at least in 77, not 70, 2007 or something like that, maybe longer. But give them a little bit of your background, Greg. That's relevant as well. I just tapped the surface.
Well, as you said, I mean, I started out as an engineer, and so worked in that field for about 10 years. Worked with NASA, and how that's kind of relevant is it's really useful in dealing with building systems for all the people in this industry and the small business consultant or small businesses that we work with, because one of the things that seems to be missing a lot is having systems in place that are productive. Now, in that field, in that area, they had too many systems and too much bureaucracy and too much crap that you didn't need to deal with. But to have a perspective of that point of view so that things get done in a way that you can kind of abdicate your job, not abdicate, but delegate delegate your work so that you can go to Tahiti or you can go on vacation and still get your business run properly, really is one of my passions, so that we can be good business owners and not having to be doing everything and sweep the floors and all that stuff without in stress about the way our business is run. So that's how I started. And then I got, as you said, into a lot of other things, and had businesses of my own, and had thousands and, well, now tens of thousands of clients. So we had to worry a lot about marketing and gaining new members, new clients, and new people running through our doors, and then helped a lot of other small businesses. And you and I got together, it seems like it's about a decade ago or more, that we've been working together in various capacities, so that we've been helping lots of businesses in lots of different areas.
Which actually started with us working together on the internet marketing side, is search engine optimization, website development, which has now evolved into content marketing greatly, podcasts, blogs, all kinds of things to round up the search engines and or buy traffic. And then has evolved from there into social media marketing as well, and getting really effective at that and pulling all those pieces together. And ultimately, a term that I stole from Jay Abraham years ago, but we've mastered, is the marketing Parthenon approach, which, kind of like I've got a painting of Wall Street in the background, but if you think of the Parthenon in Greece or in Nashville, there behind you is a bunch of different pillars, all holding up the roof. Is most advisors really get very fixated on one or two things. They get fixated on everything's got to happen by referral. And even with referral, kind of snarky, but we'll always ask, well, what referral systems are you implementing? And they look at us with a blank stare. Or they get fixated on filling the room with plate liquors and buying everybody a steak dinner, and then hoping that they skim some cream out of that. And you could say there's probably a few others, but I find most advisors miss the point, and this is stolen from Dan Kennedy. But the minute you open an RIA, or the minute you go into you're either captive or independent, but the minute you're in the position where your income is dependent upon your efforts, you are forever and always in the business of marketing your product, of marketing your service. And really the technical stuff behind the scenes of managing the investments, although the minimum threshold, the minimum bar has to be a high level of competence at that. But that's not the secret sauce. The thing that determines somebody being highly successful is being great at marketing their service and being great at client retention. And all of those other pieces are pieces that we can farm out. But and by the way, you mentioned the word abdicate a minute ago, Greg. Is the biggest mistake I see advisors make is they want to go find somebody and abdicate their marketing to, which it's great to hire an agency to do a piece of it. It's great to hire somebody who can be a copywriter and write copy, or hire an agency to manage Facebook or something like that. But it's a horrible idea to think that you can go pay somebody and they're going to handle all your marketing for you and not understand all the different systems that you can use to drive traffic and what the best ways to do that is. It's a horrible process. But anyway, let's get to the crux of our subject matter. Greg, you haven't seen this graph. Well, you've seen it, but not in this context. I want to share screen again and see if I can do that without it going in the wrong direction. But here we go, sharing's on this graph here. Let's see. Here we go. One reason you have to think about target marketing is this graph, and this is just the U.S., right? Is what we talk to is a lot of advisors, and we ask who is it you're working with, and they say, oh, everybody needs my service. Well, as soon as you say everybody, you have a horrible marketing strategy, right? And then they'll say, well, I've been running ads on Facebook to people who are 50 to 65. Well, okay. By this graph, and what this is the population of the United States projected for 2021 by age, and blue is male and black is female, proving that women outlive men. But But what you have here is just 50 to 54, you have 20 million people. Just 55 to 59, you have 21 million people. Just 65 to 69, you have, what is that, about 18 million. And just 60 to 64, you have 20 million. So if you were saying you're targeting 50 to 65 years old, what do we figure that out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's over 60 million. And if you pulled it up to 69, that's close to 70 million people. See, it's a fool's errand to say, everybody is my market, or people who are pre-retirement or early retirement are my market. See, that's always the wrong way to go. And so what we want to talk about is two sides of it, and they're similar, but they're different. One is target marketing to get to an audience that's appropriate in a way that's manageable to go market to it. And the other is niche marketing, which is one way to go about that. And Greg, Minnie, why don't we start with niche marketing? And let's give some examples. And here's, I think, the biggest fear that advisors have. And I'll start talking to them about niche marketing, and they go, well, oh my goodness, I already have 100 clients, or I have 300 clients, and if I become a niche marketer and I only target, pick a group, then I'm going to not fit with all those other people that I have. Or what happens if other people want to come in and use my services that don't fit into that niche? Greg, how would you handle that erroneous belief about niche marketing?
Well, just because you work with one niche doesn't mean you can't work with other niches as well. I mean, that's just kind of silly thinking. What we have to do is make sure that if your message goes, back to why you need to niche market a little bit. And if your message goes out to that entire 60 million audience that you're just niching by age, then the message really isn't going to anybody. You're going to look like everybody else that's marketing to that target market. When we're marketing, we have to make sure that the message is saying something to the individual person that makes them feel like you're talking to them. Now, the worry that your current clients might think that you're not paying attention to them is really a fault of your client retention processes, that those might be falling by the wayside. And I guess one good example of that is the people that we were working with during the pandemic actually did better during the pandemic than they did before the pandemic, because they were continuing to work with client retention tools and help them invest and help them, keep managing their money the way they should have. And their clients did better, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and let's say it this way, and I meant to bring this up. Maybe I will in a second. But I was having the conversation. I mentioned Dan Kennedy. Some of you know him as a marketing guru. Very, 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 very sharp guy who's been in pretty ill health for a while. But I was talking to him about financial advisors, and he's done a lot of work with financial advisors as we have now. And his reference was, which I didn't understand, it was the theme song for Weeds. And I was like, okay, well, I don't get that, but fine. And so I went and looked up the theme song for Weeds. And the basic premise of Weeds is little houses ticky-tacky all in a row. And the idea is, and what he was getting at, which got lost on me because I wasn't a fan of the show ahead of time, but what got lost on me was, in that reference, was what he was talking about is financial advisors all seem to be undifferentiated from one another, and all look alike, sound alike, feel alike, and so forth. And one of the first things we do, and somebody had raised their hand and had a question, I think. I'm not looking at that. Mindy, maybe you can look at that as we go.
I got it when you're ready.
Yeah. But financial advisors, and Tom Peters used to call, if you remember Tom Peters, he used to call it businesses that were, their marketing was, we're no worse than anybody else. And advisors, it all seems to have the same look and feel. They try to be, I don't think it's too dated a term, milquetoast. Try not to be opinionated, try not to offend anybody, try not to be flamboyant. And we've started calling it the guy in the oak desk in a J.C. Penney suit. Tim Ferriss in his book called it the what was it, the old fat bald guy in the red BMW convertible. But you've got to stand out, and you've got to be unique and different. And one of the things about being unique and different is some people will be repelled, but other people will be attracted. And what we're always looking to do is have an image and have a specialty. And I don't mean a specialty from the standpoint of you only handle people with this particular need, although it certainly could be that too. But what I mean is you've got to have something that makes you stand out from the crowd, that is unique about you. And so let's talk about niche marketing. And Greg, did you want to bring up what that question?
Yeah, the question is that this is let me look at his name here. The question is Daniel Simungal. I hope I pronounced his name properly. He has two options he can niche market to, and you can let us know what those options are, and that there's some overlaps, and how should you focus on only one or both of them? And you can focus on, I guess I'll answer that question. You can focus on two niche markets, but you've got to be clear on whether or not you have the energy or the budget, or it makes sense to focus on those niche markets. So we need to know what those niche markets are before we can answer that question more fully.
Yeah. It could be as simple as you have a separate website or a separate landing page for each of those niches, and then you have a separate direct mail campaign, Facebook campaign, LinkedIn campaign, etc., for each of those niches, and drive them through a common funnel, right? Healthcare workers.
Yeah, it may sound like that's a lot of work, but it may be this very little extra work. You've got one campaign you build, and then you just tweak it for the other ones. And yeah, charitable professionals and healthcare workers, those could have a lot of overlap. So it may not be a whole lot of work to work both of those niches.
Yeah. But let's give some examples. So the healthcare workers, charitable workers. Let's give some real examples of people we've worked with just recently, and how you can go work it backwards. So let's start with picking a niche. I think usually shouldn't start out with, you look at the entire world out there and who has the most money, and I want to go point at whoever I think has the most money. That's usually the wrong way to go about it. The right way to go about it is think of what you have a natural affinity for. Oftentimes that starts with, for an established professional, look at your client base now. Oftentimes there's a skew in your client base. Maybe you already have a lot of professional realtors or commercial realtors, or maybe you already have a lot of medical professionals, or you have a lot of dentists, or you have cardiovascular surgeons, or pick something, right? And the other thing is to look at what your hobbies and other interests are. And so 3 examples of advisors that we're actively working with right now. One of them's background prior to becoming a financial advisor was he was a general contractor. And so now we've got the book of why all general contractors retire broke and what you can do to not be one of them. And so we create the book on that. And then, so we're looking for general contractors. We can go in and find all the trade magazines for general contractors. We can find the trade association for general contractors. We can get a mailing list of general contractors. If you don't know, we can upload that list to Facebook and give it a custom audience and do Facebook ads at general contractors. We can upload that list to Google and have Google do display ads at that list for general contractors. And then he can become the go-to expert for the General Contractors Association. He can go be a speaker at their events. He can now utilize their membership list for either them to mail information to their clients for him, or he can place ads in their newsletters, their magazines, and we could go on and on and on. But once you have an affinity group that you can already speak their language, there's many different places to find mailing lists available, to find magazines that they read, to find Facebook groups that they hang out in, LinkedIn groups that they hang out in, to find trade associations that they're involved with, and so forth. So that's one example. Another example is, an advisor that I work with. He's got, plus or minus 200 million assets under management, a million, way over million into the seven-figure practice, but what he likes to spend his frivolous money on is Porsche 911 turbos, and so he's a Porsche guy. So, and I haven't gotten this to happen yet. I keep pushing him to do it, but what my vision of his is he's got the office with the drive-in garage on one side, glass wall. The conference room is on the other. He's got his collection of 911s proudly displayed. But then what we can do is we can go to the local, regional, and national Porsche Club. We can advertise in their local magazine. We can advertise in their regional magazine. We can advertise in their state magazine. We can go to the Porsche dealer, which is a friend of his, since he's spent over $1 million with them or more. We can go to the Porsche dealership, and they'll communicate with their clientele. We can even have seminars at the dealership. He could take his top clients out to a day at the crack and make a whole big deal about that. But he could go through everybody who either has a Porsche, would want to have a Porsche, or think that Porsches are cool, and we can target market those people. So we can find the magazine, we can find the mailing list of the magazine, we can find the association, the club, we can go show up at their events, we can have tablings at their events, we can do tie-ins to their events. And so one of them is a career niche. The other is a hobby niche. What was the other one we were working on, Greg?
With Peter?
Well, no, with
Well, I was going to mention, before you get to that, I was going to mention that the idea with all this is it's a lot easier to leverage these marketing pieces when you're within a niche. So, you know, the list of things that you mentioned, these all end up working together. So if you're at these different places, you know, for example, in the Porsche Club, obviously that already has a built-in kind of upper end demographic where these are probably good potential clients. But even if they're, you know, we get asked about referral systems, and, you know, we get business by referrals, but now you're actually bringing your clients to an event at the track or an event at the you know, at the Porsche dealership, or they're coming with you. They're more likely to bring a friend to something pretty cool like that than they would be, you know, I don't know, a webinar on, you know,
on 401k rollovers.
Exactly. That's not that sexy to you know, invite your buddy to come to an event like that when they've already got a 401k. You know, I mean, that's not that cool. But if you're going to another one that we asked him to set up, and the funny part was he had done this and it worked really well. The art gallery, he had a relationship with with an art gallery and had done that and had gotten a lot of referrals from that, but never did it again.
Yeah, for referral, for a client referral event.
Right. Why not?
The other one I was thinking about was David, not David who just asked the question, but my friend David. He has created a multi-million-dollar business. And what his focus is he's a dentist. His daughter had some pretty serious health issues. He wanted to not be stuck behind the chair 24/7. While at the same time, I think she had a kidney transplant, among other things. It was a very serious, life-threatening injuries. But it was kind of a revelation in his life that he wanted to figure out an alternative way of earning money rather than by the hour standing behind the chair looking in people's mouths, right? And so he figured out how to do that. And once he figured out how to do that, he figured he had an affinity with other dentists. And now he's bringing in well over $10 million a year, pulling dentists together with the target audience being dentists who have $1 million or more, primarily in liquid assets, who are primarily in the 50 to 65 range, who don't want to be staring into people's mouths every day. And again, this is a national and at times international business, so it's not focused on, in this case he's in Dallas, it's not focused on just Dallas. And one of the advantages of effective niche marketing is it makes it much easier to go national, or if you're licensed appropriately, to go international with your service. And you can do live events where you bring them together as in groups. You can do one-on-one by Zoom. We can teach you how to do all of that. You can do small group by Zoom like what we're doing, either in webinar format or in open discussion format, which is my preference. But he's built a business over 10 million a year with the idea of how do I get myself financially secure so I don't have to look in people's mouths because I have family issues going on. That turned into, I can now show other dentists who have liquidity how to do this themselves. And they have this whole, I don't remember all the details, but this whole hierarchy of how they think about what they're doing from a standpoint of how far away they are of getting out of their practice, what their timeline is to get out of their practice, they help them sell their practice if they want to, or they help them delegate the operations of their practice. And again, it's not that we're suggesting go to dentist, we're suggesting what's your background, what's your affinity, what are your hobbies, and there are going to be other people out there, depending upon how narrow it is, but there's going to be other people out there who think it's cool. And sometimes it's just, by the way, Greg, I found that Dan Kennedy reference here for a second. Let me just to entertain myself, if nothing else. Here was what his reference is. Did that work? Here we go. Let's get into it.
Yeah, everybody the same.
All the same. You get the idea, but it's once I figured out what it was a pretty good reference. Is last thing you want to be is the the guy or gal in the JCPenney suit behind the oak desk. That's but basically your marketing is I'm no worse than anybody else.
Well,
right?
And everybody's going to be claiming that they're the most trusted, and everybody's going to be claiming that they're the best in their getting good returns for people, even though they can't make those promises, but they're still going to infer that.
Or they're a CFP or the C.
Yeah, and all the jumble of letters after your name and blah 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 blah. All that stuff is first of all, it's boring, and you're not going to stand out by doing that. There's no way to stand out by trying to put your qualifications. And most people, especially those of you who may have some really, really special qualifications, the more special your qualification is, the less the general public would know about those things, unless there's some very unusual case. So they're not going to even care. That's why this is even more important. That's why it's important for you to stand out and for you to focus on your niche market. But anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. One thing I did want to point out is you mentioned that what Dave, I think, was doing with webinars and in other markets. Some of the people on the call might be thinking, well, during the pandemic or during that time, I wasn't able to do as much business because I couldn't be live in front of people. What we found is if you do things right, and that's what we help a lot of people with, the problem is they're not doing it right, that the online type of marketing, doing it live with webinars, live but on webinar format, if you do it correctly, works like gangbusters. It works just as well as in person. Again, it's got to be done correctly. Usually people would go to that format but do it wrong, and then they would say they wouldn't get very good results. So some of these things just need to be tweaked a little bit. And then you don't have to leave your house. You don't have to be traveling all over. You don't have to go all over your state or all over the country doing live webinars and trying to get people into rooms and paying for rooms and all that stuff. So anyway, I just want to mention that if anybody's thinking in the call that can't be replicated in a way that also works for your lifestyle, for the lifestyle that you'd like to live.
Yeah. Well, and on the credentials thing, for grins, I made a list of all the ones I came across in research and in LinkedIn. So you can be a CFP, you can be a CHFC, you can be an RICP, you can be an MMCP, a CASL, CCFC, CHSNC, CLTC, AEP, MSFC, AIF, etc. I mean, there's 5-10 more. And I got to tell you, the general public doesn't know the difference between any of those things. And they're going to work with you, or the big institutionals might, but the general public doesn't know the difference in any of that stuff. And they're going to work with you because you are interesting and you are competent, and then ultimately that they like you, right? and frankly, their measurement for competency isn't very good. So it really comes down to, have you built trust and built rapport, and do they feel comfortable with trusting you with what you're doing.
Well, the truth is whether it's not whether you're competent, it's whether they believe you're competent. And it shouldn't be that way. I mean, it should be whether you are competent, because a lot of people there's unethical people, which we assume nobody on the call is here, but it's whether they believe you're confident, which is built on trust that you just mentioned, which is why you need to be one of them.
Yeah. But again, to differentiate niche marketing from target marketing is, you've got to wrestle down from that 70 million or 80 million or 330 million, whatever group of population you're looking for, and you've got to decide who specifically do I want as a client and who would be a great client. I know the other example I was trying to spit out there a minute ago was, I have a good friend who his business is helping business owners who have a business who are, say, in the $1 to $5 million category as far as revenue, and he builds them up over $10 million, and then it's all designed on putting all the pieces together for an effective sale. In other words, a liquidity event. And so then they end up with a 10, 15, depends on their niche industry, is a 10 to $20 million liquidity event. And then another one who is positioned to take that liquidity event and help them not go buy the Lamborghini, the Island, and the TD, and the and get divorced and find the new trophy wife to spend all the money on. Helps them keep the money. I mean, that literally is how he describes his business. Is that 90% of his effort is having them put the money in investments that aren't touchable for a year, and then they can decide what they want to do from there. And by the way, what happens at the end of that year is they're all bored, because everybody who thinks they're gonna move to Florida or move to the Tahiti or move to the Virgin Islands and retire, whether they're 35 or whether they're 65, entrepreneurs don't do that. They get bored pretty quickly and they go buy or start a new business. But he's literally in the business of taking the hand off from my friend Walter and helping them with the liquidity and helping to make sure that liquidity doesn't get wasted quickly in the euphoric rush of having cash in the bank. And most entrepreneurs who have built businesses like that, they've had cash flow, they've had earnings, but they've never had that kind of liquidity before. So frankly, without you, they don't know what to do with it appropriately, and can either end up broke, but almost always they end up in a building or buying another business pretty quickly from there. But to give you an example, I mean, that's a very specific niche. Let's find business owners with a business this big and help them create a liquidity event. Let's take business owners with this size of liquidity event and let's help them manage their money and ultimately work at fee-based managing their assets. But the rationale is you're going to have more cash than you ever thought you'd ever have, and we're going to make sure that it's still there in a year, 2 years, 5 years. And here's the reality of what your life likely looks like after this liquidity event. See, when you start thinking that way, and again, the conversation we were having a week ago was working directly with business brokers. I used to do teleconferences, pre-Zoom, teleconferences with, I think it was 850 business brokers and franchise brokers every month. Now, not all 850 showed up, but that was the target audience. So every month we'd have 100, 120, 130 of those people on a live teleconference that we were communicating with. So that's yet another way of now target marketing and niching. Another example, and the name is going to escape me here, but we were working with an advisor who had already 2 or 3 C-suite level executives as clients in a big tech company. And my first question is why, instead of marketing geographically, why don't you just build with that tech company? I have another client who was working with middle-level people in Hyundai and Kia and ended up working with all the C-suite people in Hyundai and Kia, and then he can roll it out across Hyundai and Kia. So you get the idea. is you're much better off to get laser focus on a group of people who are going to be a good fit. And if you have no starting point, start with, look at your client base. Who do we have already? Is there some commonality here? Do I already resonate with, again, commercial real estate brokers? Or do I already resonate with, do I have a bunch of MDs? Or do I have a bunch of dentists? Or do I have a bunch of chiropractors? And once you start with that, then what we're specialists at is, let's go find all the magazines they read. Let's find the newspapers. Let's find the trade association. Let's figure out a way to get those dentists together and create a something off of their circle of influence. Let's figure out how we're going to have events for them. Let's figure out how we can have regional events. And you're always going to be better off to have a really specific target of people that you're messaging to. And again, as you said, Greg, it could be several groups of people, right? I can have a front-end marketing funnel for, in that case, for people who are working in charities. That's a big enough. I was worked with charities. My mother, all the way back to what, Mindy? Probably before I was in high school. For 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different subsets in that. But I could certainly work my way through that. And then, the working with medical professionals, well, there's an awful lot of subset of that one, right? I could be working with Kaiser, and then I could be working with one of the other big HMOs and working my way through their employees. I could be their go-to person. Or what I could be is I could be the go-to person for RNs, and I could go to the associations for RNs. I could be in the newsletters that go out to RNs. I could subset that and be going to the anesthesiologist who are specialties within that, and targeting that. There's so many different ways, but until you really narrow it in, it's hard to focus on where you're going to go from there.
Yeah, and what you're mentioning, and people should hear this, is that once you do that, then you need to have enough things going on within that target market that you've identified, so that you have a healthy business. What we get asked all the time, and the delusion is that what's the one thing we should do now? So what should we do?
What's the one magic pill?
Yeah, or we get asked, or we get told, oh, well, I get all my business through referrals, which means you're really not doing any marketing. You're just kind of waiting around for people to call you. And both of those two things are really unhealthy for your long-term success. What's healthy is to have enough things happening, and it's much easier when it's a niche and you've got a good target market, so that you've got enough things happening and that's what we're really, really good at helping you with, that all of the things should work really well, and they're all leveraged maximally, so that you get some results from each of them. And some of them, one month might be a home run, and some of them might be based hits. Maybe one month something won't work, but then the next month it could be a different range of ones that work really well. And you're outlining a whole bunch of them that are really effective, that we've helped people with lots and lots of different ways. But it's got to be the right ones that's going to fit you. It's going to fit the niche market you're in. It's going to fit the kind of things you like doing.
Yeah. And starting point is never market yourself as being the same as everybody else, but a little bit more competent. Always market yourself as being a unique entity, somebody who's going to stand out. And we worked with an advisor, and he was a Longhorns. He was a graduate of University of Texas. His website had pictures of Longhorns and was whatever their colors are. They're all of their colors in one thing or another. And he was marketing
burnt orange. I remember that. Yeah.
There you go, burnt orange. And he was marketing to University of Texas graduates. Now, that doesn't mean he only has to market to University of Texas graduates. We could, frankly, you could have gone to every university in Texas and had some reason to market to alumni of each of those. You just sure as hell wouldn't want, OU, Oklahoma, OU graduates to show up on the Texas
landing page. Yes, yeah, you got to be careful about making sure that overlaps.
Or your guys are. I don't think I ever went to a college that had a football team. I I'm halfway joking.
Georgetown doesn't know. Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
so.
well, University of Tulsa they do, but University of Tulsa, Georgetown, and Daniel School of Business, aka DU, they're not famous for that. But see, there's all different ways of going about that. But you start with who do I already have in my client base, and is there a skew of people who I've already attracted or already gotten to? And if so, then we can find that and we can figure out how to multiply and multiply and multiply around that. Otherwise, you look at what's your background. Did you do something else before you got into this? I see Brian's on the meeting here. Well, Brian is into fly fishing and he's got a background in running restaurants. So restaurant owners might be a natural niche. People who are fly fishermen. I mean, there's an awful lot of people who are into fly fishing. So, and if you might think, well, how do I get to people who are fly fishermen? Well, what is it I call them? Cabela's, Disneyland for people who like to shoot.
Bass Pro Shops.
Bass Pro Shops. I mean, hell, you could work with all the different organizations that service that, but we can go in and find every magazine targeted at those people. We can get the list of people who subscribe to those magazines in almost all cases. We can upload those lists into Facebook and LinkedIn and target them. A category like that, Facebook can go find more people. They call it a lookalike audience or targeting by interest. And so you can go after them on social media. You can go after them online on Google. And you can go after them through other places that they're congregating, which ranges from magazines they read, organizations they join, merchants that they visit. And you start expanding that circle, and all of a sudden you have 20 different ways to get to fly fishermen or Porsche enthusiast or to general contractor.
Brian needs to start writing that down.
Yeah. We've had that conversation a couple of times. Yeah. But you start finding 5 and then 10 and then 15 places to get to a fairly narrow but useful and appropriate niche, right? So if I wanted to go after chiropractors who were tired of popping people's backs, I might know what the age group is, and then I might know what the practice size was that I wanted to target. And I can find a list of that. I can go to the magazine they read. I can go to the various newsletters. I can get a list of the subscribers for that. I can get the list of every chiropractor in the United States. I can tell you it's, last I looked, around 70,000 of them. Then I can subset them by age of the owner. I can subset them by revenue of the facility. I can also do host-parasite relationships. A good friend of mine is franchising chiropractic clinics, Health Source. Another friend of mine is a coach and consultant for chiropractors. So you could do a host-parasite relationship. You could find the guy who has written the book, is hosting meetings, is coaching chiropractors. You could find the guy, I forget the other name, but there's 2 or 3 now, very successful chains of franchise chiropractic clinics. They would love to have you help their individual franchise owners manage their money better and retire rich and frankly not go out of business. That's the biggest issue you have as a franchise, or is making sure the franchisees are successful, and having somebody give them some direction over their shoulder in managing their money is an essential on that. Greg, as we're doing with people that we coach in other niches, and as we've done with our employees. I mean, that's how I got into this niche. At the time, I had about 60 employees, and I was looking for executive compensation planning, and ended up working with a chiropractor, and then realized they knew shit about marketing. And even the very successful ones have a very narrow, limited range of their focus on marketing. I can't believe it. We're already 45 minutes into this, and have barely scratched the surface as usual.
Yeah, and most people do those host parasite relationships wrong. We talk to a lot of people, and when they do have a niche market, and then they go talk to a lawyer or an accountant or whatever and say, hey, I'll try to give you $50 every person you refer to me. And that doesn't work. They're lousy at referring people. So you got to use other methods to get relationships built, have cooperative workshops and get their list, and then you're the one that would be marketing to them. And there's lots of other ways that we can work with them, and we don't have time in the next 15 minutes to go over that, but that's a whole nother workshop. In fact, I think we have a video that we'll want to share with you on how to do those kind of relationships.
We do actually. Yeah.
And almost everybody does that wrong, and that's why you're not getting results from your CPA that you'd like to work with, a lawyer you'd like to work with, and people keep suggesting. We see this sea of I think you call it the bozo explosion of gurus that are telling people to do these kind of things, and they just simply don't work because they're not doing the building the relationship right.
Yeah. And I'm gonna try a dangerous experiment, but I'm gonna promote everybody to panelist. What we know is oftentimes there's no there. But anybody has any questions? I was planning on us going about 45 minutes. We can take a couple more minutes, and anybody who has any questions, jump in here. And David, we just barely touched the surface on your question, so we're happy to delve a little deeper into that.
This will let you guys all talk for real.
Yeah. But if you accept the invite, you'll be able to come in, get on camera, get on microphone, and join the conversation or answer any question, or feel free to chip in on the discussion here as well. And we'll take a couple minutes to do that. If anybody has any questions, great. If not, we'll call it a day. And I would suggest give Mindy a call, schedule a time. We can handle any specific questions you have on a personal basis.
And we put her number in the chat box. I think Mindy or Steve put it in there.
Yeah, that's the 303-808-8719 number. And David, did you want to expand on your question about the two different niches?
Got on mute there, sorry.
There you go.
I was just, this is something I've been looking at in the last couple of months, and I'm thinking about which way do I go? And part of my question was, should I just stick to one of them? But I think Greg made a point earlier on, you've got to have a viable business too. So just throwing all of your, going after the one bucket might not be a good idea. So just wanted your thoughts on that.
Well, I guess I would start with it depends on how big the bucket is, right? I mean, if I pick the niche where I can find 10 people who fit that category, that's not going to get me very far, to be extreme. But healthcare workers, frankly, isn't narrow enough to be very targetable. It's I don't know how many millions of people would fit into that category. If I were starting with it, David, I would find what the narrow niche specialties are, and I've done a lot of work in that field, looking at that, as we all have. But you find the narrow niche specialties, and then you find the places that you can get to them the best, and then you leapfrog off of that. And what I'm always in favor of is marketing to a narrow niche on a national basis, as opposed to trying to build a really big, healthcare workers, RNs think a lot different than plastic surgeons, for instance. And by the way, that would be a great niche, is plastic surgeons. I mean, they have a hell of a case size, and usually have some pretty good cash flow if they're halfway successful. But you find, I always would prefer to find a narrow niche and then go regional or national, rather than to find one where the people within the niche really don't have much affinity and try to speak in all of their language at once.
Yes, I was looking to sort of be more specialized, as you're suggesting, right? I've got an interest in a particular aspect of healthcare, and I thought that might be, because of my personal experience in there, that there would be an affinity.
Yeah. Which subspecialty?
It's palliative care.
Palliative care.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean that's a much easier way, a much easier place where you could get to them, and then you can speak their language. You can everything from the imagery you use on the website, the imagery you use in the ads, and depending upon how aggressively you go at it, I mean, oftentimes you can hire an expert by getting, not necessarily paid, but you get a very successful client who loves you, and then they can kind of become the face of that particular niche as well. I use Dan Kennedy's example. One of the places he kind of started off early on is he was doing dentists and chiropractors, and he doesn't know anything about either one of them as far as how to do what they do. But I mean, he was so well regarded in that niche that he'd go to a chiropractor convention and they come and say, "Hi, Dr. Kennedy," because they just assumed he was one of them. But he was adopted that way because he could speak their language, and everything resonated well with them. And that's the most important thing, is to get the language right.
Okay, thanks very much. That's great advice.
Yeah, make sure you set up a time with Mindy, because we'd like to dig into this a little deeper and help you with the next steps on it if you haven't done that yet.
Yeah, we can show you how to find the different magazines and lists and associations, all that kind of stuff really quickly.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, you bet.
If anybody has any other questions, feel free to chip in here. I gave you the ability to come in and join in as a panelist if you want to. And otherwise, we'll start wrapping up here in just a second, Greg.
Yeah, and I think David's question really applies for everybody. That's a good example of how your niche, even though you have a niche, it might even be important to narrow that down further and be thinking about what niche within the niche. Like if it was, you talked about Brian's with fly fishing, there might be even narrower pieces of that maybe they have. I don't know much about fly fishing, but maybe there's even narrower things in there.
Yeah. And again, hopefully that worked again. Anybody who hasn't gotten our big package of stuff, in fact, I have it on my floor here.
Yeah, this is at advisorwealthmastery.com. I'll put the site on here.
Yeah, or you just can give Mindy a call and she'll make sure you get all of it. But there's a huge packet of information, but we'd love to give you a couple books, couple of special report on marketing. One of them is on social media marketing. But more specifically, what we'd love to do is set a time to give you some specific feedback on what you're doing. And from a standpoint, the other question we get a lot is, what is it you guys do? And really, to give you a short synopsis, and then we'll let that call it a day. But the short synopsis is, our role is creating a coaching, mastermind, implementation environment for financial advisors, wealth managers, the spectrum of this industry, to show people how to go from wherever they're at now to add another 7 figures to their practice. And oftentimes the limitation is either not getting enough new client flow, or getting client flow of in what I call fishing in the wrong pond. So bringing people in who don't fit the profile of what they're looking for, right? If you're focused on assets under management, it's much better to have 100 clients with 20 million each than it is to have 100 clients with $6,000 in the bank, to give an extreme example. We help you find that target niche and then help you go get to the right people, fishing in the right pond. We didn't speak much about target marketing really, but target marketing and niche marketing and creating a perspective for yourself that's memorable. The second element is we bring advisors who are successful and doing well, and bring them together in the same environment to share best practices. And I know there's a lot of that sometimes in the industry, but oftentimes you have a bunch of people who don't know anything about marketing, don't know anything about really growth and development of your market, giving you their best guess. And frankly, Greg, I know you and Mindy would agree with this, but an awful lot of people who have grown a pretty good book of business, they did it through sweat equity, 100 hours a week, and there's an awful lot of better ways to do it than just go sign somebody up and pester them 24/7 on who else they know and work your way through it that way. And we haven't talked about referral systems, but there's a number of ways to generate really effective referrals without it just being that. That's why we always recommend putting the book together, and we can help you with that. Putting together client appreciation events. You mentioned the art gallery or the one at the winery and so forth. But client appreciation events, places where they feel comfortable, creating webinars, Zoom meetings, where your clients feel comfortable bringing their friends, books, special reports, white papers that are pass along tools. We can go on and on and on. But again, if you're in the mode of marketing yourself as no worse than anybody else, nobody wants to talk about you, right? If if my advisor brought me out to the winery for the wine tasting, brought me to the art gallery, took me to the day at the track, took me, whatever it might be, if they're interesting and they're idiosyncratic and they're fun to be around, well, that's a much easier dinner conversation to have than, oh, I guess, Bill, you might also have a 401k rollover you might need to do, and I got a guy who can help you with that. Well, that's not going to become the lunch conversation.
Right. So I posted the where you can get everything. Somebody asked about it in the chat, and so the link's in there.
Yeah. Yeah. You can go to the link or just give Mindy a call, and she'll take care of that. Mindy, anything to add to the conversation before we head off?
She's on the phone.
No, I just got off the phone. Yeah, no, I think you kind of got it. And if anybody has any questions, definitely give me a call and I'll make sure they get to the right person, get connected with you guys.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Greg, anything to leave them with?
No, I think it was a good summary, and everybody needs to follow some of this and start figuring out your niches. And then when we meet, we can talk about how to detail that in and give you some really specific direct feedback that you can take and use right away. So
yeah.
I look forward to talking to each of you.
Yeah, and I would just leave it with, the worst sin of all is to be milquetoast, is to be no different than anybody else, to be like that weed song, is you want to have hobbies that you're talking about, you want to have opinions that you're talking about, you should think about who your target audience is and make sure it's going to be things that resonate with your audience and perhaps repel people who aren't in your audience. We talked about fly fishing. I mean, if somebody sits down and wants to talk to me for 30 minutes about fly fishing, my eyes are going to gloss over. But the Porsche thing would get me excited. So you want to be thinking about who it is you want, and then be opinionated. Wear it on your sleeve. Have interesting things about you. Have human interest about you, and that doesn't take away from you being competent, but it makes all the difference in the world with you being interesting. On that note, we'll call it a day. Mindy's phone number is 303-808-8719. Give her a call. Make sure we have a time to follow up and give you some direct individual advice. And any other questions you have, we're happy to handle at that end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to talking to you. All right. Thanks, guys.
And I will see if I can get us to